He is big enough to make everything that there is. There are some people who seem to think that this universe is an accident. It just appeared and nobody knows where from. And someday it will go away and not be anymore. And you and I are just an accident in the middle of the accident. Now, I'm not going to give a big philosophical discussion today. But let me say this. This universe is not a mistake or an accident of the vacuum. St. Thomas Aquinas once said, every effect has a cause. This universe was caused by something, and that something was not caused, and that uncaused cause is God. How many of your head is already hurting thinking about that? If it sounds difficult, let me put it this way. God is big enough to make everything that there is. Now, if that is true, then something else is true also. God is big enough to do whatever He wants. You cannot tell God what to do. And you can't stop God from doing whatever He wants. Everyone else we know, the Ayatollahs as well as the President, they find that they have limits. And usually more limits than they thought. How many of you know that the President can't tell an oil well to stop leaking? I'm sure if he could have, he would have. But with God, there are no limits. The Bible puts it this way. With God, all things are possible. Now, what does that have to do with us gathering here tonight? Especially on a night that is so hot, with more people than the air conditioning can handle. What it has to do with this is this one thing. God has chosen this place. Planting this church was and I'm going to use an English word here, it's a long shot. I remember the first time I met somebody and they told me that they were Assyrian. I looked at him and I said, you said Assyrian, not Syrian. Now, how can there be Assyrians when there's no Assyria? See, I knew my history. I knew that Nineveh had been destroyed over 2,600 years ago. How can there be an Assyria, no Assyria, and still be Assyrians? Then I had a friend come out from Oklahoma. His son was a student at Oral Roberts University. And his professor told him that there were no Assyrians anymore. So we took him and we stood underneath your flag. And we took a picture and we sent it to him. So the first barrier that we had to overcome was the thought by many that there were no Assyrians. How many of you are glad God hasn't forgotten? Then the Southern California district called me. In fact, it was Brother Jim Guttell right here. And he asked me if I would be willing to work with Pastor Shmuel Italyei. Now, I heard that name, Shmuel Italyei. And my first thought is, we're starting an Italian church? And why does an Italian have a first name Shmuel? And then they told me that he was Assyrian. I have since heard from Pastor Sam how his name became Italyei. Aren't we glad for bureaucrats who always know better than us? The other thing I couldn't imagine was that there could possibly be enough Assyrians in the San Fernando Valley to start a church. And then the worst part of all, I really wondered, in all honesty, how I could be any help anyway. Maybe someday I'll learn Assyrian, but probably not. But I am trying to learn Farsi. Y'all pray for me. Now, from the outside, from the perspective of 5 years ago, it was not very likely that this church was going to succeed. But God had a plan. God knew that Pastor Italyei was going to end up here in the San Fernando Valley. He knew that all of you were going to be here. And he knew that there was going to be a church here. I really enjoyed Pastor Sam's testimony today. We've talked about a little bit in the past. But I didn't realize how tentative he was about coming here. It's always fun to make somebody translate what you're saying about them, by the way. God knew something else about this church. He knew that a partnership between West Valley Christian Center and the First Assyrian Assembly of God of Los Angeles was the best way to get the church going. And the reason why this has happened is because nothing is impossible with God.
Amen.
So here we are today. Just like Solomon 3,000 years ago, in another church that God has caused to be built. This church is made of redeemed humans rather than stone and wood and gold. Of all the things that we could say that are the same between then and now, the most important is this: never stop praying.
Amen.
Solomon knew the importance of prayer. How many know that Solomon was rather wealthy? He may have been the most wealthy man on the earth at the time. So many people with money think that they have everything they need. But Solomon knew the importance of prayer. Too often, prayer is an afterthought when something else doesn't work. We get sick.
مرايبة.
What's the first thing we do?
ومن دي كام أي مولي بعده.
Call the doctor.
زيجا مخايخ كدكتور.
Now there's nothing wrong with